All right, hi all. From the Skillman team and the Assembly of European Regions, welcome to participate in today's webinar on improving the attractivity of TVET for women. Generally speaking, today we'll look at how we can make technical and vocational education and training more appealing for women, and we will share a few good practices of this approach later on. I'm very glad to see many of you attending already. I see people from every regions and every country of the world. This event is co-organized by Skillman and the Assembly of European Regions. So I would like to thank very much the girls from the Assembly of European Regions for their efforts in the organization of the webinar. Also the speakers, thank you very much for being with us today and sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Thank you very much. And also the audience, thank you very much for attending. Now, while we wait for more people to join, I'll get you all instructed very quickly for the time that we will be spending together. As you see from the screen now, the audience has the microphones muted, so your microphones are switched off, and the same for the cameras. You can ask your questions and share comments if you want in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. So you can do that at any time, and then Joanna, the moderator, will be collecting all the questions, and we will address the questions during the Q&A space as usual, and we'll be answering your questions maybe. So let's move on. All right. Very quick self-introduction. I'm Valentina. I am the communication manager of Skillman, and I'll be with you today throughout the whole webinar with our event speakers today. I would just like to mention the fact that this event is not a sole event, so it's a part of digital events that we are organizing on EU funding opportunities, and we have been implementing them already for a while now with the Assembly of European Regions. The objective of those webinars is to establish effective partnerships and to design, let's say, create synergies for cooperation for future European projects. Of course, this event is embedded as part of a project called Skillnet, in which we work with the Assembly of European Regions, also with the European Network of Innovation for Inclusion, with the International Vocational Education and Training Association, IVETA, with EAPRIL, and in special partnerships with the European Training Foundation. With this project, we want to establish a strategy to develop a large network of centers of vocational excellence. And for that purpose, we organize also these digital events for our international audience. Now, I'll just give you a few key milestones that we have reached so far with the Skillman network, which is, of course, a part in the organization of the webinar today. Skillman stands for Skills in the Manufacturing Sector. The network was created in 2014. We have reached more than 600 members in 300 regions and 93 countries. We have ambassadors all over the world. As I mentioned already, we constantly organize activities to engage our stakeholders. And basically, the network has a main objective, which is the skills research and training in the advanced manufacturing sector. In the beginning, it was more focused on the advanced manufacturing sector. Now it has developed in many other sectors. But so the main aim is still the same: introduce and exchange skills to cope with the challenges of the labor market in terms of skills. Now, I leave you the numbers for later if you want to get back to them. Now, I just want to forward you an invitation. This year in November 15th to the 18th of November 2021, we will organize our biggest annual event, the Skillman International Forum. Of course, you are all welcome to already register for the event. Luca is sharing with you the link in the chat. To this year's edition is going to be tackling three main topics: digital and green revolution, the micro-credentials, and sharing is caring. So, of course, social inclusion and gender equality are a big part of of this year's conference. So if you want to continue the discussion of today's webinar, and of course you're interested in having those discussions, you can already register for the annual event. Last but not least, we have set up some peer learning clubs, some groups of experts that share, that are engaged in discussions to, let's say, move forward with discussions on TVET related topics. You see them here on advanced manufacturing sector, on advocacy and policy influencing, on work-based learning, and train the trainers. If you want, you can join our peer learning clubs after this webinar to continue the discussions. Luca, again, is sharing a screen to do that. We are streaming on our YouTube channel, the Skillman.eu YouTube channel. So if you want to watch it live, we are there as well. And we want to know how you evaluate this webinar. What do you think about it? If you like the quality of the webinar, etc. You can do it by filling a very quick evaluation form that my colleague is sharing in the chat box right now. Without any further delay, I would like to introduce you the main speakers of today. The first one, Andrew Gibson, the Assembly of European Regions Vice President for Inclusion, Diversity and Equal Opportunities. He will give a very general overview of the topic of today. After him, we will have some good practices of this approach from three main representatives. The first, Alexia Farfada, Junior Policy and Campaigns Officer from the European Women's Lobby, SRHR lead. The second, Michael Miller, Project Officer at the Opportunity Center. And the last one, Caroline J., the Project Manager of the Skills, Partnerships and Strategy team. Now, I don't want to take any more time for myself, so I will just give the floor immediately to Andrew Gibson, the Vice President of AER for Inclusion, Diversity and Equal Opportunities. Thank you very much for being with us today, Andrew. Good morning, and the floor is all yours if you want. Thank you.
Good morning. You can hear me, can you?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm actually in Milan at the moment, self-isolating. So this is a great opportunity for a break. Let me say initially that the AER has been working on mainstreaming gender and equal opportunities for over 10 years now. And we've set up an observatory on equal opportunities, which actually led to my role as the Vice President for Inclusion, Diversity and Equal Opportunities. In this context, the focus on technical vocational education and training provides an opportunity to look at the situation from a gender angle. Incidentally, I'm also a politician in Hampshire, and one of the speakers is one of my colleagues from Hampshire. I'm very pleased to she's joining us. I would also like to thank Joanna and the team for their passion and commitment to this series of webinars, for which they have engaged some excellent speakers who will stimulate us all. Hang on a second. Sorry, my paper came there. Within our gender equality program, we have seen the importance of not stereotyping women and their career journeys. Women have a major role to play in providing the skills Europe will need in the future, in the changing environment that we've got in terms of technology and cultural and social situations as they evolve. We have also seen the correlation with unemployment in countries with a well-designed vocational training program. These countries find it much easier to avoid youth unemployment, and even in times of crisis. However, this section has traditionally been predominantly a male environment. In fact, when I studied electronics at university, I'm not going to say how many years ago, there was only one female participant in a group of 100. While the situation has improved, we still are encumbered by an old mentality that is reluctantly embracing reluctant to embrace the potential that women offer in the technical workplace. As my partner keeps telling me, where women have competed in technical roles, they have often proved more efficient and dedicated than their male equivalents. And there are a substantial number of cases to support this point. So the question is why TVET doesn't attract many girls than women, and what steps can be taken to attract more women to TVET, and this remains a conundrum. If we look at the EU, this is why the EU Parliament underlined the need to continue to address gender bias, gender stereotyping choices by ensuring and encouraging the equal participation of women in vocational training. For what are usually traditional male professions, and of men in female professions. I mean, in Hampshire, we find that we have as many men and women employed, but the women are taking the lower paid roles, when really they have the potential to contribute much more to the organization. Calls for gender dimension to be reinforced in efforts to modernize VET systems is also on the EU agenda, and to make learning both at and outside work more accessible to women employees and those with families and care duties. This is really important about facilitating the family duties within a work environment, not least in the sections where women are underrepresented, notably the digital, STEM and green sectors. In order to combat gender segregation in education and employment and combat gender stereotyping. Today we have a number of really interesting presentations which explore these issues and will lead to a vigorous debate. Now I'll pass back to Joanna.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you for stressing the importance of gender balance to improve the economy. It's not just to be nice, it's because it's efficient. And I would like to give the floor to Alexia Farfada, Junior Policy and Campaigns Officer at the European Women's Lobby. Alexia is active at the EU level, and you'll see that our speakers are active at different levels, and we'll discuss that more in the panel discussion afterwards. Alexia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, and thank you for having me in this very interesting webinar. I'm just gonna share my presentation with you now. And I guess we can start. Yes, so my name is Alexia Farfada. I am Junior Policy and Campaigns Officer at the European Women's Lobby. And so I will tell you a bit more about our work, especially when it comes to combating gender stereotypes, and even more, especially when it comes to the field of education, which is our crucial topic today. Just very quickly about the European Women's Lobby, so you have a bit of background on our work. We are the largest European umbrella network of women associations with more than 2,000 organizations. This in all the EU member states, but also in the so-called candidate countries, such as Turkey, North Macedonia, Serbia, also the UK that left us, unfortunately, and also including Iceland. Our main goal is, of course, to influence the public, but also crucial stakeholders and especially European institutions in supporting women's rights and more generally gender equality between women and men. And for that, we focus especially on 4 portfolios, which are to put an end to all forms of violence against women and girls. For this, you have the example of our campaign, which is called Brussels Call and Her Future is Equal. This campaign aims, for example, at combating sexual exploitation in Europe. We also want to promote women in leadership positions and decision-making processes. We do it especially during the European elections with our 50-50 campaigns, so that we want to have more and more MEPs who are women. We also, of course, support women's economic independence. And actually, 3 weeks ago, we launched our website on gender budgeting. So if you are interested in that, you can have a look at our new website. And finally, which is linked to our topic today, we of course want to challenge and change the culture of sexism and stereotypes. And I am going to tell you more about a campaign we did with the support of the Council of Europe. So regarding this campaign named Sexism, See It, Name It, Stop It, we worked with the Council of Europe, which adopted a recommendation through the different ministries compounding the Council of Europe. It was a recommendation on preventing and combating sexism, especially calling for action in areas such as language, communication, internet, social media, but also education institutions, which are our priority for today's webinar. And you can see that 9 of our delegations took part in this project. And so thanks to this campaign, we could notice the main problems, the main stereotypes present in education. And among them, we especially noticed that a lot of textbooks contain stereotypes related to assumed gender roles. So basically the fact that women are overrepresented in care-related field when men are overrepresented in physical activities or technical activities, which is challenging, especially for little girls to, project themselves in career paths when these career paths are said to be only for men, but we will tackle that a bit after. Then we also noticed a lack of representativeness of women as role models, but also the fact that they were underestimated in books in their contribution to society. So their historical, cultural, scientific role is often silent, unfortunately, in schools. We also noticed a lack of trainings when it comes to career counselor, but also to teachers, even if sometimes it's not voluntary. And I can share with you a small personal anecdote. During my first year of university, actually, I was told by a career counselor that, fighting for gender equality is not a job and that there are no jobs like that. So then when I got hired by the European Women's Lobby, I thought a lot about this woman. It was a woman, actually, who was perpetuating this kind of stereotype. Then, of course, unfortunately, we have a lack of awareness among students and children sometimes, and a frequent absence of procedures and action to tackle sexist behaviors and gender stereotypes when it happens in schools. So then we can see that all these stereotypes, all these issues have important consequences in the educative field, especially when it comes to girls, because a lot of studies, and especially one done a few years ago, proved that by age of 6, girls internalize the fact that some careers are not made for them because it's more for boys, and that indeed it triggers limitation for them and for their lifestyle choice, which is quite dramatic and sad. So, of course, basing ourselves on all these issues, some recommendations were provided first at the school level. So, of course, the need to review textbooks to make sure that the content of the textbooks are free from sexist and stereotypical roles, that women are depicted as role models, that their contribution to society is recognized. We also encourage all the educational systems to have complaint mechanism, but not only to have them very well knew, that everybody can access them equally, that are easily reachable. Also to teach explicitly about gender equality issues and about history and the fact that women have been unfortunately silenced for a long time, and that it's important to change the narrative. And we also push, of course, to include topics such as consent, personal boundaries, and also comprehensive sexuality education, because we can see that a lot of, let's say, boundaries and comes from the fact that this topic is not tackled even at school. And so that it's important to have that also to encourage critical thinking and representation of all kinds of people, all kinds of minorities, nationalities, different backgrounds, etc. And of course, providing trainings on unconscious bias, because we can observe that indeed very often it's not even voluntary. It's just that it's stereotypes passing by from generation to generation without any specific reason. So it's important trainings for the personnel, of course, but also for students, children, counselors, etc. So this was at the school level, but we need also to tackle that at the European level, and this is what we do at the European Women's Lobby, and this is what we try to implement, especially when it comes to the gender equality strategy that was launched. One of our key priorities is to make sure that the European Union stick to its commitment and to the application of gender mainstreaming in all the EU policies to make sure that this component is taken into consideration every time. We also push for an enhanced control on sexism, stereotypes, not only in schools, but also in media, in advertising, in everything that can have a big impact on representativeness and on role models. We, of course, push for funding related to this topic, because it's not enough to have ideas. We need money to implement these ideas. And of course, we also want member states to have incentives for creating awareness-raising campaigns, but also all kinds of, let's say, policies to actively challenge gender stereotypes and change the culture of sexism that is still, unfortunately, predominant. So here are some useful readings if you want to dig more into what I just introduced about our campaign. If you can have some inspiration for your own national or local stakeholders. Our feminist principle on sexuality education to include in educative establishment, our recommendation for the European Commission, and more generally our website, so you can have a look at it and get some inspiration if needed. Thank you very much for listening, and of course I'm waiting for your question.
Thank you very much, Alexia. So here we had the example of lobbying at EU level and collaboration to make policies change. The next speaker, Michael Miller, Project Officer at the Opportunity Center, will present an example of good practice exchange and development of tools on gender at European level between different regional stakeholders. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Johanna. Morning, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. So just to introduce myself, as Johanna and Valentina have said, my name is Michael Miller. I'm Project Officer at the Opportunity Centre in Bradford in the north of England in the UK. We're a not-for-profit social enterprise, and I work in the international arm of the organisation, which has a wealth of experience coordinating projects at a European level, so the Erasmus Plus scheme, Horizon 2020 and EuropeAid. I've been invited to the webinar this morning to discuss Gender Plus. So Gender Plus was a Key Action 2 Erasmus Plus project, which lasted for 2 years and was focused on innovation within the VET or TVET sector. Gender Plus developed a series of resources, governance and benchmarking tools for use by professionals in this sector to understand their approach to gender inclusion, tackling the underrepresentation of minority gender groups. So in the context of today's discussion, we're talking about the glass ceilings, that, or so-called glass ceilings that women often encounter when they enter the workforce, the continuing gender pay gap, as well as exclusion from certain career paths. The VET sector is very much stratified along traditional gender lines. So if I go into my office tomorrow, you'll see that the majority of young females go into childcare and health and social care type courses. As Alexia mentioned in a previous presentation, boys tend to go for construction, plumbing, again, there's sort of manual traditional professions. So what we're trying to do here is kind of break down those kind of expectations that people come into the VET sector with, and so people actually follow courses that they're passionate about, that they have an interest in, that they can envisage a fruitful career in the sector, rather than just doing what's expected of them by their friends, family or peers. The Gender Plus project's taken a top-down approach to the project. So what we mean by that is that when a member of VET staff uses our online resources, they're actually trying to picture the whole organisation as a whole. So rather than just someone who's particularly interested or invested in these issues, when they go to use our suite of resources, they're trying to determine overall in their VET setting what the kind of attitudes and atmosphere are regarding gender inclusion and gender diversity. The Gender Plus project was a transnational consortium. So the UK was the coordinator, and we had partners from Finland, from Slovenia, from Bulgaria, Cyprus and Italy. And as you can probably imagine from the diversity of today's audience and contributing speakers, there's a very kind of uneven picture of these kind of issues across Europe. So things that are currently tackled in, say, English school or British schools aren't necessarily tackled in Bulgaria and vice versa. I think the TVET sector is especially important because it's unique in that young people have the classroom training and they also have the practical training off-site. And in our desk research and field research, we found that young people were supported in following gender atypical courses at their classroom setting. However, when they went out into the workplace or into the construction site, for example, they dealt with things like sexist language, even sort of more unconscious issues. So things like lack of a female toilet facility, or lack of female or equipment for women. So for example, overalls which fit a smaller frame, or a hard hat, or steel toe cap boots. So sort of very minor things that a vocational provider can give access to young women wanting to pursue these courses. In terms of the bank of resources that we created, the initial research led to what we call the Gender Plus Charter. So the Gender Plus Charter is a list of minimum requirements that an organisation in the VET sector should try to adhere to or to conform to in order to be sort of considered gender positive. So this covers things like the training of staff, the resources that are used by the teaching staff, both the technical teaching staff and the sort of the classroom side of VET training, tackling bullying, both on work placements and in the classroom settings, and in the kind of language that's used to groups of students, and not just assuming that all construction students will be boys and all childcare students will be female. The current best practices we found, it was both in the partner countries involved, but also on a wider level. So for the last 25 years or so, the Opportunity Centre was the Euro Guidance Centre for the UK. So we were able to interview members of staff from all across Europe, in and out partner countries, to find out about current best practices in gender inclusion. The minimum requirements that were laid out in the Charter fed into the development of a benchmarking tool. So this is an online resource which VT practitioners can go to assess their current services and track improvement. And this is kind of boiled down into 4 main categories. We have policies, communication skills, staff training, and teaching practices. We understand that gender inclusion can often be quite a contentious or controversial issue in some countries. So the idea is that people use the benchmarking tool over a period of time. It's not a one-time only thing. It's something that they go to and to kind of scope out at first, read more about our best practices, find out about the picture across Europe, and then over time, try to become more and more gender inclusive and welcoming, for example, to girls on traditionally male areas, male subjects, or male work placements. Over time, they track improvement in these areas, and they reduce what's called the gender footprint. So the responses that the VET provider or VET organisation provides or gives tallies in with the gender footprint. And once the gender footprint is reduced to an acceptable level, the organisation can class themselves as a gender inclusive training provider, and therefore can publicise this and disseminate this using a Gender Plus kite mark and certificate. The third and final output, which is obviously tied into this, is the Gender Champion Skills Profile. So the Gender Champion Skills Profile lists the core, important and optional skills that a member of staff within a VET setting should have in order to be the main person, or not necessarily an oracle, but somebody who can signpost other members of staff and help students if they do encounter barriers to pursuing what we call gender atypical courses. So in the context of today's session, if somebody who leads a construction course at a VET provider in Europe has a female student who wants to access the course, but they feel that they're not sure how to approach it, how to make the course gender inclusive and supportive of female students, they can go to the Gender Champion and find out more about the kind of language they should be using, the kind of resources they should be accessing to make the VET setting as inclusive as possible. And again, in the UK, for example, we do have like equality and diversity leads, but gender is it's quite nuanced and it's quite multifaceted. In terms of the project, we took a pluralistic approach to gender. So we talked about obviously female issues, which we're discussing this morning, but also the issues of trans rights, trans access to education, but also men. So not just assuming that men have everything easy and everything's made for men, that men also encounter issues such as peer pressure, toxic masculinity, and that can often lead them to not pursuing traditionally female jobs for fear of being seen as weak or effeminate or something like that. If you were to access the resource, you'd register and have access to this dashboard, which obviously shows the access to assessing your gender inclusivity, discovering best practices from across Europe, downloading the Gender Plus Charter, which lays out the minimum requirements to adhere to, and also access to the Gender Plus Kite Mark and certificate, which obviously comes emblazoned with the Erasmus Plus logo and disclaimer, which basically shows that the kite mark that's being produced by the Gender Plus project has the backing of the Erasmus scheme. You can also see on the left panel there, we have the Insights tab. So the Insights tab allows you to compare the results of your gender assessment on the benchmarking tool with other organizations in your country, but also from across Europe. So you can basically determine how you're doing in terms of gender inclusivity and the acceptance of girls on traditionally male subject areas and track improvement over time. If you are interested in accessing the project resources, you can see on the screen here the Gender Plus website URL, as well as a direct access to the benchmarking tool. But as Johanna said, all these resources will be accessible, all these presentations will be accessible after the event. Just as an aside, kind of leading on from what Alexia mentioned in the previous presentation, this project, Gender Plus, has led straight into a Followon Project, which is again an Erasmus Plus KA2 project. This is focused on the early year setting. So as Alexia mentioned in her presentation, by the age of 6, young people, boys and girls, have already got a predetermined idea of what's expected of them in terms of the kind of toys they should be playing with, the kind of books they should be reading, the kind of friendship group they should have, the kind of career they might want to have in the future. So the Diversity Plus project takes the principles of Gender Plus, but puts it and places it in the early years education and care setting. And this project involves the same partners from Bulgaria, Italy, and UK, along with partners from Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and the Netherlands. So again, if you are interested in finding out more about this Follow-on project, feel free to click on the hyperlink within this presentation to find out more about Diversity Plus. Finally, if you are interested in finding out more about the project, either Diversity Plus or Gender Plus that's been presented this morning, feel free to contact me on my email address or via LinkedIn. Obviously, as Alexia mentioned as well, unfortunately, we've been kicked out of the Erasmus scheme because of Brexit. We hope to rejoin the Erasmus scheme at a later date, but obviously for any UK organisations on the call this morning, or anybody else who wants to get involved with working with us, you can see on the screen about the kind of things we're involved in. So about social mobility, innovation, inclusion, culture and creativity. So if any of these topics kind of spark interest for you, feel free to contact me, and we'll definitely be interested in discussing both Gender Plus, but also any new initiatives. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you for underlining the pluralistic aspects of gender inclusion, the impact on men with toxic masculinity, and the variety of fields in which the TVET sector needs to become more inclusive, and not just the TVET sector, which includes outfits, physical things not to the right size, but also attitudes, language, and a variety of aspects. Thank you very much for underlining that. Our next speaker, Caroline J. from Hampshire, will share a personal story of a woman in construction, and that will show a real female career path in construction. Caroline, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Bear with me a moment. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me on this webinar. It's great to be participating. My name is Caroline J. and I work for Hampshire County Council. I'm a colleague of Andrew Gibson, who introduced our seminar. And I started work for Hampshire at the Construction Skills Fund as a project coordinator within the Skills and Participation section of Hampshire County Council. This was a 2-year project delivering pre-employment construction training to 1,800 people across the whole of Hampshire. 40% of the first cohort of 1,100 people went into work, and we're still waiting for outcomes on the second, which only finished in March. There is a huge shortage of construction workers in the UK, and the point of the CSF, the Construction Skills Fund project, was to deliver short pre-employment courses aimed at getting people site ready and into work. And this morning, I'd like to tell you the story of Natalie, who was one of our learners. Natalie lives in Petersfield, which is a small town in the south of England, with her partner and 3 children. Natalie had been working in the care industry full-time since leaving school, and initially she enjoyed it. But after a good few years in care, she was after a new challenge, something to break the routine, and she liked the idea of working outside. So she decided to move into health and safety. She wanted to become a health and safety officer in a care home. She heard about our training courses through her housing association, Radian. And our training course would get her a CSCS card, which is the basic health and safety license that you need to work on a UK construction site. She thought that these health and safety elements would be a good introduction to the subject of health and safety and would also give her valuable knowledge about the construction industry. So Natalie did a Construction Skills Fund course at the Future Skills Centre in Borden, the FSC. FSC is a specialist construction training centre funded by Hampshire County Council and run by Basingstoke College of Technology, who are our delivery partner on this project. Natalie's 2-week CSCS card course included a 3-day plant and heavy machinery taster session, and Natalie was inspired. She got on a forward tipping dumper, which is that huge machine you can see in the picture, and she just thought, this is it, this is me. Natalie passed the tests and came away with her Green Labourer's CSCS card. But she then lost her job in care, and she had to use the money that she'd saved up for her next step into health and safety, which was taking a NEBOSH qualification. She had to use that to pay some bills. But fortunately, there was enough left over to do a 3-day course, which got her a machine ticket for driving dumpers. She then came back to me, and I organised 5 days unpaid work experience with one of our Construction Skills Fund partners, the construction company Mildren, in a small town called Fareham in the south of England. And within 2 days, the team she was working with had asked their boss to take Natalie on permanently as a machine operator and dumper driver. Natalie said when she initially went on site, she was really nervous, but the team made her feel at home immediately, and she said that her gender made no difference at all. Reflecting on the change in her life, Natalie said, the CSF course changed everything. I used to lie in bed, not wanting to get up. That's all gone now. I come into work happy and I go home happy. It has been life-changing. I found my feet in my new career, and I'm so grateful to my housing association and to the CSF for this. Natalie's message to any women considering a career in construction is this: don't be scared to go and do what you want to do. You'll be surprised at how much construction has changed. I want all women to know this. It might suit them perfectly. I do get a lot of women looking at me driving a dumper around, but mostly they just want to know why I chose to do this. Natalie's boss, Stuart, also said that many women are intimidated about coming on site, but his words are, you don't need to be intimidated, just be yourself. We don't treat Natalie any differently. She's just one of the team and she gets on with it. So what can we learn from this story about making TVET more attractive to women? Well, the first thing is that it's a good option for career changes for people in middle life. And while it's important that we attract young women, we don't want to ignore those who are coming in with life skills and experience. With people like Natalie, the point about short CSCS card courses, short vocational education courses, is not to train people to become site labourers, but it's to open the door of the world of construction and the wealth of opportunities within it to them. The second thing we can learn are about the vast opportunities for progression within these industries. Natalie's options within the care sector were always going to be limited, but within construction, she's moved into an industry where she can progress to a higher level, to higher skilled work relatively easily by getting new machine tickets or management training. And this is not to say that we don't need people in the care sector. Obviously, we do. Natalie realised that she had ambitions once she got onto a digger, and that in construction she could realise them, benefiting both her and her family. With the ongoing near critical shortage of skilled construction workers in the UK, this sort of career change has the potential to significantly change Natalie's prospects and her earning potential. And the third thing I'd like to say is about making TVET attractive, certainly in construction in the UK, is this low entry bar. You don't need a degree, certainly in the UK training model and the one that we used in CSF. This sort of training could be done over a relatively short period of time, and that in itself is attractive to many people. As I said, one of the really great things about construction is this low entry bar, but you've also got the possibility to progress, which is huge. With this CSCS card, you can get onto site, and then with the right attitude, commitment, the opportunities, and a little bit of luck, the opportunities come from there. So what next for my team? Well, the Construction Skills Fund project has completed, but the Construction Skills team at Hampshire County Council have secured new funding from the very last round of European social funding to deliver construction and skills training to 1,450 people over the next 2 years. We're using a similar model, short courses with qualifications and then support to get into work. You'll be glad to know that the target for female participation in this project is 31%, 450 people. Now, if you know anything about construction, you'll know that's very, very steep. Overall, in the UK, women make up around 13% of those working in construction, but most of those roles are more highly skilled office jobs. The sorts of participants that we're working with, who are going into entry-level roles on site, it's more like 1%. We're aiming to make a real difference with our project, and we're reaching for that target. Our first step is a webinar on the 21st of July for all our partners, tell them about the target, and to ask them for their support in reaching out to women at all stages of life to encourage them to think about construction. In this project, we also have some funding to pay for childcare, which will help. I've heard very recently as well about a new drive for flexible working in the construction industry in the UK through the TimeWise initiative, and we'll be keeping a very close eye on that. And if anyone on this webinar wants to help us reach this 31% target, please contact me after the session because we'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Caroline, and thank you so much for making this link between the personal and the system levels, how changes at the system level do impact the personal lives of citizens, how it changed for the person whose story you shared. It changed her will to get up in the morning, which is quite considerable as an impact. So at this stage, I would like to invite all the speakers to put their microphones on, and we're going to take questions from the audience, and also I'm going to ask questions. There's one question from the audience. I don't know if someone on the panel would like to has experience on this, is how to address, let's say, the gender equality awareness or capacity for parents and grandparents. Has anyone on the panel worked on communicating with parents and grandparents? Are there good practices on the panel on that, or experiences that you would like to share? Does anyone have experience on that? If not, we go to the next question, because if you don't have the...
I'm happy to.
There's one thing I
go
could
on,
say.
Carolyn.
In my experience of dealing with careers fairs, with sixth form colleges, with technical colleges, it's about aiming the publicity for those things as much at the parents and the grandparents as it is at the young people. So that means reflecting on, for example, which social media networks you use. It's all very well publicising your careers event on TikTok and Snapchat, but parents and grandparents don't use that. They tend to use Facebook and other social media interactions. So that's just one thing that we tried to do when we were thinking about our publicity in this particular area.
Thank you.
I
So,
can just,
yes.
Sorry, John. It's Andrew here. Sorry. I was just going to say, as probably the older generation on this call, you know, when my mother was born in 1921, she was brilliant academically, and but her parents were only interested in finding a good husband, and you know, she had masses of opportunities, but the family, you know, sort of suppressed those initiatives. So when you talk about grandparents and parents, I think that's the start of the issue, because as you're growing up, if your parents and your grandparents aren't encouraging you, you get into the situation that Natalie was in, Ken Carolyn's example, where you find yourself doing something you don't particularly like when you've actually got the academic ability to have done something different and something that you really enjoyed. So I think it's massively important that we engage with parents and grandparents so that they're giving the right messages to their siblings and grandchildren.
Thank you very much for underlining the importance of addressing parents and grandparents, addressing the communication towards them, and the different ways to do that. So TikTok for the young people, younger generations, and Facebook for parents and grandparents, in order to have a support system behind women who want to go in TVET. Michael, you seem to want to contribute as well to this question?
Just to echo really what Andrew said, the idea that a lot of the barriers, it's kind of learned behavior. You know, young people don't innately want to do a particular kind of career. It's what they see their parents doing or other people in their community. So by showing role models like Natalie, by discussing topic events like this, it gets people thinking and hopefully spreads down into the community, so that that parents and grandparents encourage their children to follow gender atypical careers.
Thank you very much. And actually, I like your input because it helps me to go to the next question, which is about sharing stories. I'd like to ask our speakers on the panel, in your experience, why does it even matter to share stories? How does speaking about practices impact the daily lives of citizens?
I can start if you want. I don't know how we take the floor, but let's do it this way maybe. So first of all, I think that it's very important specifically for representativeness. It's very important when it comes to having role models, and not, you know, not one kind of role models. We need to really have people from different backgrounds, different minorities, so that children can internalize from the earliest age that they are able to achieve their dreams and their goals. So this is the first thing. And I think the second important thing about sharing stories is that it would allow stakeholders to be aware that we shouldn't please ourselves with the bare minimum standards. We should be ambitious, and we should take inspiration of the practices that are a bit everywhere in other countries, because we can see some discrepancies between countries, some much more progressive, some much more conservative. But thanks to that, we can see that it's possible actually to be ambitious and to reach better standards for girls and boys to achieve their dreams. So I guess this is also a matter of pushing for the progress for all the stakeholders in all the countries. So these are my two main points, but of course I give the floor to my other colleagues on the panel.
Thank you very much. So I heard representativeness, diversity of role models, and not be satisfied with the bare minimum, but be challenged by other practices. Thank you very much for this input. Is there someone else on the panel who would like to answer this question?
I was just going to say to kind of avoid sort of tokenistic imagery. So that typical image of like the girl wearing the hard hat, that's all well and good, but you also need to have actually like Carolyn's example of a lived experience to find out a real person's experience of considering a career which isn't necessarily typical for her gender or for, you know, for her sex. So it's important to share stories so girls can actually see that these things do happen. It's not just kind of a tokenistic image or something that's used for marketing purposes for a college. There's actually daily experience where people go, you know, girls go on to construction sites or become plumbers or whatever it might be.
Yes, and I want to see another pink construction hard hat in my life.
Like,
yeah, please, let's not. For me, it's about relatability. You know, Michelle Obama said, you can't be it if you can't see it. So it's about enabling people from all different types of women at different stages in their lives. It's about enabling them to relate to that change in their lives. So I think it's that point of seeing someone who is like you. And that's why we need really diverse gender role models, you know, lots of different diverse models. But if you see someone like you and you see how they've changed their path, then it makes it much easier for you to envisage how you might be able to do that, how that might be possible. For someone who is like Natalie, seeing someone who has got a degree, who's done their architecture, their engineering training, that is also almost as unrelatable, possibly, as seeing a man in a hard hat driving a digger.
If I could just add, without repeating what's already been said, but it goes to unconscious stereotyping. And if you can continually put out stories out into the out on the web or whatever, you know, you move the bar for unconscious stereotyping. People suddenly think, oh yeah, girls do jobs, they do go and become electrical engineers, electronic design engineers. And it's sort of like the unconscious stereotyping actually moves. And I think that's very important.
Thank you very much. So my next question is, if there was just one thing we should forget about and one thing that we should keep to improve the attractiveness of technical and vocational training for women, what would it be? Andrew, do you want to start as you were the last one?
Shall I go first while Andrew has a moment to think?
Yes. I'm sorry. Go first, Carolyn. Sorry.
I'm going to turn your question slightly on its head, Johanna. The thing I don't want to forget about are people like me, because we talk a lot about TVET in the context of younger people, but I think older women have an awful lot to contribute as well. So people in their 40s and 50s, it's really important that they have the chance to participate in technical, vocational, and educational training as well. People like me come at jobs like this with a huge amount of skills and experience. Often we're done with, you know, family life is less complicated, although there may still be caring responsibilities in another area. So don't lose sight of the breadth of women as we travel through our life journeys. That's the thing I don't want you to forget.
Thank you so much for this input. And I do have to say that when we did the title of this event, I on purpose kept women and not girls, because that was important to not focus on original training and girls only. Does someone else on the panel want to answer this question? So one thing you would like to forget, that we should forget, and one thing that we should keep.
I'm not sure about how to answer this, but you know, we go through life with a perspective that we get from our parents and our own environment, and a lot of people, you know, forget that there are alternatives, and they go through life and they're stuck in a particular rut, and they don't actually sort of just stop and say, look, I can change, or they feel sort of trapped in an environment where they don't like their job. They may not be having you know, their family life is reflected, their reflection of the fact they're not happy. And, you know, I think that you need to be able to change. And also, I think our attitude, as Carolyn said, to older people, having now I'm sort of just about retired, but as I go through life, you know, I was very lucky. I was blessed to have jobs that I really enjoyed, but I see so many people stuck in employment, both men and women, where they actually don't enjoy what they do. And I think some of the projects, the retraining projects, you know, I mean, are so important, and people ought to sort of like be open to change, because okay, it may be difficult, they may be reactionary, but you know, life is not a rehearsal. You know, you only get one chance at it, so always be open to change would be my view.
Thank you very much for these words. So what you want to keep is the idea of there are other ways, there are other doors open, and this is independent of the age also, and the career path.
I mean, also just one other thing, we haven't spoken a lot about immigration and the issues of integrating men and women who've come, say, to the UK or to the EU. And as part of the integration, that's another part of my inclusion, diversity aspects of my role, is that this is a marvelous way of integrating people into your own societies. Like in England, we need to have more programs that integrate immigrants into these sort of vocational programs, because the thing is, you can go to university and you learn a lot of academic wonderful things which then have to be applied to a job. But if you're a good carpenter or you're a good plumber, you'll always find a job, and it actually gives a massive amount of stability and confidence to the individual. So, you know, I think that we ought to look, as part of the inclusion program, especially at women immigrants who may feel lost or disenfranchised in environments like in the UK. I know I've gone off at a tangent, but I just thought I'd put that on the table.
Thank you very much. And actually, ensuring more women are included in the labor market is one of the objectives of the EU Action Plan on Inclusion and Integration. So that does resonate with our work. I have a last question in the chat, and then we'll have to close because it's already time. So what are the challenges while promoting the attractiveness of TVET for women? Can some of you on the panel share their experience on? Alexia, I see you nodding. Is that because you want to speak? Go.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Yeah, I mean, the first challenge that comes into my mind very spontaneously is the fact that, you know, education is still a field defended as a national competence. And so we face some member states that are still very much conservative, and that, for example, refuse whatsoever to include the word gender in their textbooks or, you know, in their education programs, because they think that gender is a bad word, doesn't mean what it's actually meaning. So they are building, you know, very negative narratives around gender equality. And I think that this is one of the main challenges we face, at least on our side as a CSO, is the fact that we have to face a lot of backlashes when it comes to decision coming from member states. So, for example, very generally from the withdrawal from the Istanbul Conventions to states who just want to prohibit the word gender in all their educational content. So if I can very quickly say that this is one of our biggest challenge.
Thank you very much. A last contribution, and then we'll close the panel and give the floor to Valentina for closing remarks.
I think that there's a big challenge in training providers keeping up with what's needed by the industry. And if there's one thing that's been missing possibly from this webinar, it's the industry itself. So asking questions about what the construction industry, which is my field, what the construction industry needs from its technical vocational educational training. It's something we see very directly on the ground. The challenge that our local colleges face in responding to industry need. The industry moves on very quickly with new technologies, adapting new ways of working, and the education sector is much slower to keep up with that. So there's an interesting triangulation of influence there with some of the higher level policy work that's going on gender, which the colleges will all absorb, and maybe it's not so great within industry. And yet the technical needs of industry advance much more quickly than the colleges. So for me, I think that is a real challenge for the future.
There's also the issue of underfunding as well. Where do we find the funding to, create better marketing strategies, for example, especially for the UK, as we'd left a lot of the schemes that EU funded, with sort of thinking about how we're going to fund courses going forward.
Yeah, I just endorse what you've all said. It's we just need a change of mentality and outlook, and more support for gender equality. I mean, gender budgeting is, as Alexia mentioned, it is one of the vehicles to enforce that, because people don't always do the right thing. So you need to have some tools to push. Thanks. That's all I'd say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so we end on this aspect that there needs to be some incentives as well to make sure that things are actually implemented. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the participants also for the questions in the chat, for your attention. And I'd like to give the floor to Valentina to just announce a few items. Thank you very much, and thank you so much to the speakers.
Thank you.
Valentina?
All right, just to let you know that after this webinar, we will upload all the materials, the presentations, and the video on our webpage. And we will come up with a follow-up email with all the instructions to reach the material. Again, thank you very much from my side as well for participating, and to all the speakers, and the very interesting and inspiring discussion that we had. To be honest, we never had such an interesting and critical, crucial and let's say engaging discussion in our webinars. So thank you very much for sparking this amazing share of points of views and different experiences. Thank you for that. I will just like to remind you that we always work to make other digital events. So next one is going to be on Thursday. This one on a different topic, tailor-made upskilling for the factory of the future. Also a very actual topic. So for those who are interested in participating in another webinar, please register to the webinar through the link in the chat box. I guess Luca is chatting it with you. That one will be at 3 p.m. Central European Time. So again, Thursday, July 15th. Having said that, I wish you all a great day, great evening, great night, depending from where you are. Thank you very much for being here, and have a great one. Keep safe. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks very much.